Well, good morning and welcome back. It is now August the 15th and it is a beautiful, warm, sunny morning out here with a little bit of a breeze. However, later on this week we are supposed to be extraordinarily hot with a high of 37 for Friday. So this canola is coming along pretty quick. Last week this field was still dead green and had a bug problem, which was taken care of. And you can see that it is still kind of mottled green color. So some of these plants are really starting to ripen and toughen up and mature now. So we are starting to see a little bit of color change, some of these guys. However, it is patchy. So we're just going to have to wait, let some of these greener areas catch up. Here's a closer look at some of the grasshopper damage along the edge of a canola field. Now these ditches have been mowed. This is pretty much shows up every year. You can see these pods have just been absolutely gutted. And of course they're going to favor those younger, greener pods right to the very tips of the plants where it's still easier to feed on. They'll kind of skip the more mature pods down at the bottom, but you can see these ones have been fed on over about the last week or so, including some stem feeding here as well. When they get really desperate, they'll start to strip the green off the stems here, so some of these guys are pretty hungry. There's another canola field that is way over threshold for lygus bugs now. So this was one that I did recommend spraying last week, but for some reason or another it was not completed, and now the lygus numbers are absolutely through the roof. And this canola is still probably at least a week, maybe 2 weeks away from desiccation timing, so still lots of time for damage to occur in this field. Here is a closer look at some of that damage. You can see some of these pods are just getting absolutely shredded. They are just absolutely covered in liquid. I'm getting sticky walking through this field at the moment here, so you can just see all of the puncture marks in all these pods. It is pretty savage in here. Well, the wheat and durum is coming along real nice at a quick glance. She looks pretty ripe, but once you walk into it, you will notice there is still quite a few green heads that do have some soft kernels. So once again, they just need more time. Now, by the end of the week, this field will likely look quite a bit different with the forecasted heat in store for it. So we'll see how it looks next week. Well, there is some barley starting to come off today, looking pretty good. Looks like dryland averages in the 70 to 80 bushel range, which is pretty respectable for dryland barley, especially considering the horrible conditions we had this spring until things improved. Well, the oats that have been seeded into this dryland fall rye stubble are not doing all that great. They are coming up pretty good in some rows and not so much in others, but now you can see we are getting chewed on by grasshoppers, and there is a moderate level of grasshoppers in this field. And they are actively chewing on these oats, but unless we start getting some rain right away, it's just not worth getting them under control. Here's a late seeded field of barley that is doing very well out here by Fort McLeod. There is the odd grasshopper in there that's sunning itself this morning, but for the most part these heads are into the soft dough stage and they're looking pretty good. Some nice sized heads and lots of them. So this field has excellent yield potential. Here's another late seeded barley field, but this one is on dry land, and as you can see, it is a bit more stressed. We were definitely struggling to emerge from the boot here under some of these really hot conditions, and some of these are relatively thin kernels. They haven't filled out all that terribly well. We're just in soft dough stage here, so this will probably start ripening up in a real hurry with the heat this week. The second crop oats by Colehurst are looking not too bad. There's definitely a little bit of leaf burn on some of the tips from the environmental conditions, but overall they are doing pretty well. We're starting to come up towards boot position now, so flag leaf is extended and the heads are moving up, so it won't be too much longer. Next week we'll probably see head emergence. Well, some of that hailed out barley has now been swathed and is waiting to be combined. You can see there is a fair amount of heads in here, but a lot of them are quite significantly damaged, so it'll be interesting to see what the yield will be in here, but we should at least get some usable straw out of it. You can see on the ground here all the awns and everything else from those main stem heads that were just horribly shelled out by that hail a few weeks ago, but not much we can do about it now. Probably have quite a lot of volunteer barley in this field after it gets irrigated. Well, this hailed out corn by Colehurst is looking a little bit better this week, so some of it is now approaching 6 feet tall. There is a lot of ears forming in here. Some look better than others. Some plants are just a couple leaves and an ear or two, like this one here. There's not a whole lot of tassels, and the tassels that are here don't look particularly great, so it'll be interesting to see how well these ears get fertilized. It's too early to really tell for sure right now, but in a week or two I'll have a much better idea. Corn by Lethbridge is looking very good this week. It hasn't really grown much more in height now because it doesn't particularly need to. We are, for the most part, finished silking. Tasseling has been successful, and we are starting to fill some of these ears. So this little guy here is just kind of in milk stage here now, so it still has quite a long ways to go before harvest yet, but looking pretty good right now. Well, as a lot of this hard red spring wheat starts to dry down, you can really start to see some of the sawfly damage in here down by McGrath, and you can kind of see this one here. You can kind of see that characteristic cut off stem on the base, and when I slice open the stem, which sorry is hard to do on camera here, you can see that stem is all full of sawdust in there. So there's not much you can do about these guys. The only thing you can do is spray much earlier in the season for them before they lay eggs. Right now, the only management you can really do is if it gets bad enough, you could swath a crop like this to prevent lodging, help be able to pick up more of those heads from the field. But typically you only do that if you're at 10 to 20% stand loss because of sawfly. Well, we're at that time of the year again to start talking about desiccation and dry down in your canola crop. So this particular field is looking like it's getting pretty close. However, a lot of it is sunburn. When we come into this plant here, this is a good example. We've got a nice, clear, identifiable main stem. When you take a look at the seeds on here, there's decent color change up to about 50% of the way. And then after that, we have kind of a mottled color in here. And closer to the tip, it's a little bit more green, but the seeds are very solid and are just barely starting to turn. Some of the side branches are pretty much a very similar situation. We have some color change in some of these pods, but not in all of them. So we need to wait a little bit longer on this guy here. We want to wait for that main stem to be, pretty solid brown all the way up. Side stems to be, halfway up brown, solid seeds all the way up. We don't want any glassy green seeds. And when we get to that point, then we're going to be ready to spray this either with glyphosate and heat or with Reglone. Here's the aftermath of a hay bale fire. This particular stack of hay bales had almost 800 large squares in it of mixed hay, and just a couple tough bales in the middle caused spontaneous combustion. So the whole stack had to come apart. I think somewhere around, they said 400 or 500 bales were destroyed. Here you can see the shredded remains of a bunch of bales from yet another bale fire. This stack was disassembled before it got too terribly bad, but you can see right here we do have a few bales with scorch marks. So those must have been pretty close to the hot spot there before they got removed. Here's a really fun field. This is millet, and this stuff is developing quite nicely. I absolutely love the way this stuff looks. The seed heads are really cool. The plants are quite hairy. They're very large. They have very thick stems, very big, wide leaves. It's a really interesting looking plant. I really wish we'd see it more often in this area. Well, it's a beautiful Friday morning out here now, so I'm out riding around on the KLR, checking some fields and enjoying the cooler weather until it gets too hot. So right here is a pretty good example of where we're at with harvest staging. A lot of the barley is being swathed or combined here. These swaths are probably only a day or two away from being combined. Here we have a cornfield that is just starting to fill, so it's just in early milk stage. And right over here we have some canola that is not quite ready to swath. So a lot of canola now is starting to hit swath timing, and quite a bit is starting to get pretty close to desiccation timing. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on here right now for the next week or so until all these fields come off. But for right now, that's about the state of most fields.